There's a unique kind of heartbreak that comes when a perfectly healthy embryo fails to implant. It's a question that can feel, well, just impossible to answer. But what if we've been missing a huge piece of the puzzle this whole time? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the endometrial factor and talk about a way to get a complete picture of what's going on. So let's talk about this puzzle. For so many years in assisted reproduction, the main focus has been all about creating the best possible embryo. But as we're learning, a successful pregnancy is really a two-part equation. And that's the puzzle we're going to try to solve today. And this is the question, isn't it? The one that can drive you crazy. You've done everything you're supposed to do, the embryo is top quality, and still the cycle fails. Well, there's a clinical name for this: recurrent implantation failure. And when it keeps happening, it's a huge sign that there's more to the story than just the embryo. Okay, and this right here is probably the best way to think about it: the seed and the soil. We have spent decades literally perfecting the seed, that's the embryo. But if the soil, your uterine lining, the endometrium, isn't perfectly prepared, even the best seed in the world just can't grow. Right. So if the seed is as good as it can possibly be, our attention has to shift to the soil. And what we're finding out is that the endometrium isn't just passive tissue. It's this incredibly dynamic and absolutely critical environment for success. And this is the big takeaway, really. This endometrial factor isn't some minor detail, no way. The health, the timing, the whole environment of your uterine lining is just as important as the quality of the embryo itself. It's a co-star in this whole story. Now, when implantation fails over and over again, that's what doctors officially call recurrent implantation failure. And one of the biggest culprits can be something called a displaced window of implantation. Put simply, it just means the timing is off. So, okay, how do we actually investigate this whole endometrial factor? Well, it really comes down to asking three critical questions about that uterine environment. Let's dive in and break them down. A complete analysis looks at three main things. First up is timing. Is the endometrium actually ready for an embryo at the moment of transfer? Then there's balance. Is the microbiome inside the uterus in a good, supportive state? And finally, health. Are there any hidden infections causing problems? Get answers to these three, and suddenly you have a much, much clearer picture. All right, let's start with that first big one: timing. This is all about something called endometrial receptivity, and it is crucial. So in every single cycle, there's this very specific, very short period of time when the uterine lining is perfectly ready to accept an embryo. It's called the window of implantation. Think of it like a biological gate, and it has to be wide open right at the exact moment that embryo shows up. Now here's where it gets really fascinating. For most people, that window opens right on schedule, like clockwork. But, and this is a big but, for about 30% of women, it's displaced. It's either early or it's late. And if you do a transfer outside of your unique personal window, well, it just won't work. It doesn't matter how perfect the embryo is. So, how do you solve that? Well, this is where a test called the ERA, or endometrial receptivity analysis, comes in. Its whole job is to stop the guesswork and pinpoint your personal, unique window of implantation, sometimes right down to the hour. And the science behind this is pretty amazing, actually. It works by analyzing the expression of 248 different genes. 248! It's like taking a genetic snapshot that tells us exactly if your lining is receptive, pre-receptive, or maybe even post-receptive. It's incredibly precise. Okay, so once we nail down the timing, the next logical question is, what's the environment actually like inside that window? And this brings us to something that, honestly, a lot of people are surprised to even hear exists. Yup, you heard that right. Your uterus has its own microbiome. Just like your gut, it's home to its own little ecosystem of bacteria. And it turns out, the balance of that ecosystem is absolutely critical for an embryo to successfully implant. So what does a healthy, implantation-friendly uterine environment look like? Well, it should be dominated by good bacteria, specifically a type called lactobacillus. Ideally, we want to see that making up more than 90% of the entire microbiome. That's the sweet spot for success. But what happens when that balance is off? That's a condition called dysbiosis. You can see here the lactobacillus levels are way down and other bacteria have taken over. This creates an environment that is just not friendly to an embryo, and it can really, really hurt your chances. And this is where two more tests come into play, Emma and Alice. Think of Emma as the surveyor. It gives you the big picture, the full report on what your endometrial microbiome looks like. Then you have Alice, which is more like a detective. It specifically hunts for the bad guys, the pathogenic bacteria known to cause chronic endometritis, a kind of silent inflammation. So when you put it all together, you get the answers to these three huge questions about timing, balance, and health. So what do you do with all that information? Well, you get a clear, personalized path forward. The ultimate goal here is to move from a standard one-size-fits-all embryo transfer to what's called a personalized embryo transfer. It's a total game changer. You're not just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. You're transferring that embryo at the exact right time for your body into an environment that's been optimized just for you. And this quote from the research just sums it all up perfectly. Success isn't just about a great embryo, and it's not just about a receptive endometrium. It is about the perfect synchronization between the two. That's the magic right there. So to tie it all together, by looking at the timing with the ERA test, the microbiome balance with Emma, and the overall uterine health with Alice, you're finally getting the complete picture. You're not leaving the soil to chance anymore. Which brings us to this final question, and it's a really important one. For those of you who've been facing this unexplained implantation failure, maybe the answer isn't in finding a better seed. Maybe it's about finally, truly understanding the soil. Could taking a deeper look at your endometrium be the key that finally unlocks your path forward?